Or if I see anybody, I'll go in my usual very deep voice.
Wake up.
Yeah, wake up, so sorry. This summary event is, again, a joint event between Commission Ecosystem Management and the Secretariat of the Ecosystem Management Programme. We do have simultaneous translation. All those languages are up on the board there. I do encourage you to speak slowly, or reasonably slowly, and don't speak too fast like I sometimes do and then nobody can hear what I'm saying. So you don't have to translate that back. Okay? Now I'm going to ask Steve Edwards to say a few words about how this has all come about and why we're all sitting here now. Steve, can you say some words of wisdom, not necessarily wisdom, but...
Well, I'm going to disrupt you and ask that the Deputy Chair have a moment. We're just sort of adaptively managing ourselves to this moment, so bear with us. I'm going to ask Angela Andrade, the Deputy or Vice Chair of the Commission, to welcome you on behalf of the Chair.
Buenas tardes y gracias a todos por su presencia hoy. En nombre del presidente de PIC, quien se encuentra enfermo, quisiera darle la bienvenida y invitarlos a que durante esta sesión que vamos a tener de cierre de todas las actividades de la Comisión, tratemos de enfocar nuestra discusión en los puntos más relevantes en que queremos continuar el trabajo en los diferentes temas. Durante todas las sesiones hemos tenido 6 viajes sobre diferentes temas y vamos a entrar a mirar cuáles han sido las lecciones aprendidas y los siguientes pasos en cada uno de ellos. Entonces le doy la palabra a Ed, Steve, ¿quién va a coordinar la sesión? Sí.
El Pony Show.
¿Los dos?
Pero ahí, ¿cómo se llama? Pony. Welcome. What brought us here? We, about 6 months ago, sitting in somewhere in Idaho, sat around thinking about what are the priorities that the Commission might wish to pursue, and how might those priorities be best packaged so that we could organize ourselves to be more influential, have greater impact on the IUCN process as well as ecosystem management in the broader sense. That led us to identify, or the steering committee at that point identified 4 broad areas that within the Commission they wish to kind of organize their thinking, and particularly in the run-up towards the Congress. Those areas are disaster risk reduction, ecosystem-based adaptation, red listing of ecosystems, and resilience of ecosystem services. When the program got involved, we threw in a couple of ringers, one on drylands and the other on islands. And in fact, if you think about those 4 themes and then you think about those 2 biomes, they're really the areas that we need to be most sensitive in terms of these 4 broad themes. So it became a marriage right at the beginning in how these biomes and these themes would be presented. Now the presentation was formalized in the form of the journeys that you've all seen in the brochure. Those journeys, I'm assuming that many of you have been participating in them, that they have now led you to this patch. And we are, in this workshop, the intent is to make brief presentations on the key results from each of those journeys. And then we will follow that with I think there's a presentation on resilience. We will then break up into working groups. Those working groups each will be looking at one of the 4 themes But within those, we're going to look at some key areas that we think probably are important drivers that we need to look at in the context of those: change, risk, stewardship, and resilience. Now we're going to report back, and on that basis, I hope we're going to engage in a conversation that gives us some forward vision. And I, for one, not only want the vision, but I would really, really be pleased and hope that we get people actually raising their hands saying, that's really something that I'd like to get involved in. It's one thing to talk about the future, it's another thing to invest ourselves in it. And that's where I hope we end up today. And with that very brief intro, I'll turn it back to Ed.
Okay, so with those 6 journeys, we had tasked 1 or 2 people to sort of try and pull together some of the key threads from the journeys under those 4 headings of change, what were they all again? Change, risk, stewardship, and resilience. And otherwise, if we report it back, it could go all over the place. So we're retaining a focus, and those 4 areas are actually pretty important for the union as a whole, for those of you who've looked at the next intersessional program, so it's a key part of it. So what I want to do now is, we want to go through the report backs, and for everybody I'd like them to pull out, for yourselves as well as for the discussions afterwards, what are the key things coming out for you with respect to those 4 theme areas of change, risk, stewardship, and resilience. And that will help in our discussions. Does that sound like a plan? Does that sound like a plan? Let's have a little bit of a response.
Yes, sir.
Okay, since we've got the Vice Chair of CEM here, we'll start off with Angela, and she's going to be making sure the interpreters don't just translate English into other languages, but will translate Spanish into French, English, etc.
Bueno, la actividad que nosotros desarrollamos relacionada con adaptación basada en ecosistemas tuvo como nosotros tenemos aquí algunas de las conclusiones de unos 5 eventos asociados con el Ecosystem Based Adaptation Journey, y pues ha sido difícil sintetizar todos los puntos que tenemos. Sin embargo, con la ayuda de los coordinadores de algunos de estos grupos hemos llegado a algunos puntos principales. Primero, respecto a lecciones sobre cambio y riesgo, debo aclarar que la separación en los 4 temas que nos pidió Ed ha sido muy difícil de hacer, y hay muchos temas que están traslapados. Sin embargo, pues vamos a tratar de separarlos de una manera clara. En este caso tenemos el tema de que la evidencia del cambio debe ser informada de una mejor forma y preferiblemente de manera cuantitativa, basado en un programa de monitoreo sistemático. Es importante desarrollar herramientas para el monitoreo del estado de los ecosistemas y establecer los riesgos que se dan para garantizar el suministro de los servicios ambientales. La efectividad de las estrategias de adaptación basada en ecosistemas deben ser demostradas con una evidencia sólida. Hasta ahora tenemos principalmente evidencias con literatura gris, pero se requiere una mayor documentación y revisión. Los ecosistemas y los sistemas ecológicos y sociales cumplen un rol importante en la reducción del impacto climático y la construcción de resiliencia. Sin embargo, los vínculos entre estos 2 elementos deben ser desarrollados de una mejor forma. Los vínculos entre los medios de vida y los diferentes sectores deben ser tratados. La integración de los medios de vida en una visión más comprensiva debe contribuir a entender mejor los vínculos entre los sistemas ecológicos y sociales. Las evaluaciones de vulnerabilidad se deben enfocar en los servicios ecosistémicos y la información para la toma de decisiones a diferentes niveles. Se debe dar un peso equitativo a variables sociales y ecológicas considerando las tendencias históricas y las proyecciones previstas. La cuantificación de los servicios de adaptación que suministran los ecosistemas es una necesidad fundamental de investigación. Una pregunta que surge es ¿qué tan sostenible es el servicio de adaptación que suministran los ecosistemas? Para muchos de ellos tenemos una falta de entendimiento de los impactos del cambio climático en la estabilidad y el funcionamiento de los ecosistemas y por lo tanto todavía nos cuesta determinar si el servicio de la adaptación se va a degradar o no. La siguiente. El siguiente punto, que es ya relacionado con los temas de stewardship y resilience. Entonces, las principales lecciones aprendidas tenemos que se deben desarrollar instrumentos prácticos para implementar la adaptación basada en ecosistemas a nivel local. Se deben considerar las relaciones espaciales y funcionales entre ecosistemas urbanos y rurales. La toma de decisiones a nivel local es un tema fundamental y se debe promover el liderazgo a nivel local. El conocimiento tradicional está desapareciendo de una forma muy rápida y hay una necesidad urgente de proponer enfoques participativos para documentarlo y para ayudar a prevenir esta pérdida. Hay una clara necesidad de combinar el conocimiento tradicional con la ciencia con el fin de maximizar su potencial para promover y mejorar la adaptación basada en ecosistemas. La adaptación basada en comunidades, que es un tema complementario, incluyendo el conocimiento tradicional, puede ser muy efectiva, pero aún carecemos de mecanismos para incluirlo en enfoques y en evaluaciones más integrales de la adaptación. El monitoreo y la evaluación, incluyendo conceptos de resiliencia, es fundamental. Se requiere el diseño de herramientas prácticas para la implementación de la resiliencia a nivel local y deberían ser incluidos en el diseño mismo de los proyectos. Los enfoques transsectoriales y de abajo hacia arriba deben ser desarrollados. Las capacidades de trabajo interdisciplinario o transdisciplinario deben ser desarrolladas de manera de que para poder abordar de una forma efectiva los sistemas socioecológicos. La adaptación basada en ecosistemas debe ser implementada en esquemas de manejo a nivel de paisaje. Es fundamental trabajar en el desarrollo de capacidades en diferentes niveles, no solamente en los niveles locales, sino en otros niveles. El manejo y la articulación con las experiencias del manejo de cuencas hidrográficas son un punto fundamental para promover la adaptación basada en ecosistemas. Esos son los temas principales que logramos resumir. Sin duda nos faltan algunos de otros talleres que se desarrollaron, pero creo que esto es un buen punto de partida que articula muchas de las conclusiones de varios eventos. Gracias.
Great, thank you very much. I realize in 2 or 3 slides you can't summarize all the richness of the events. However, we will be producing a little bit more detailed reports of each of the journeys that we're undertaking. These will be shareable back. We'll post them up on the website in due course. I'm not asking the journey leads to do those 2 pages like now, but in the next few weeks. So at least have a little bit of respite. Who is next? It's Karen. You're going to come up and talk about Karen Sotomayor, CEM. She heads the task force on disaster risk reduction within CEM, and works closely with the Secretariat on disaster risk reduction as well.
Good afternoon. Oh, we have to double click on it ourselves. Okay, so this is a brief summary of the risk journey that was put together by myself and Radhika Murthy with the Ecosystem Management Program. And Angela, thank you so much for getting started, because you really were, I think, very thorough in your journey. And I think my points are a little bit simpler and will complement a lot of the things that you have already mentioned. Okay, so I broke it up into, we were tasked to look at lessons from the risk journey on change. And I put down that with change comes uncertainties. Thus the need to strengthen the case for healthy ecosystems to buffer both slow, such as climate changes, and sudden change, which is more, I would say, the part of disaster risk reduction. Now, as Angela just mentioned, EBA and DRR, this alphabet soup. Ecosystem-based adaptation and disaster risk reduction are closely linked. I like to call it the different sides of a coin. There are some differences, but I would think the similarities are much closer than the differences. So fortunately within IUCN, I would say one of the few organizations to actually have them under the same department and same umbrella. But I would say there are a need for closer linkages, at least in a commission level. I haven't really interacted that much with Angela in the past, and I hope to do so in the future. Now for risk, which was our main journey, this is perhaps where I have the most points. Radhika and I have the most points. What I've observed during this week is something we already knew, is the inadequate role attributed to risk aspects of conservation projects, which I believe needs to be a more cross-cutting theme. Most regions and countries are affected by some type of risk, and unfortunately the future will show that there'll be more and more risks. Now it was interesting, not that I was jealous, but Angela had over 300 people to her EBA session and we had 40. So maybe that just shows a little bit of the difference. Climate change has, I would say, become a lot more institutionalized and received a lot greater interest for various reasons than disaster risk reduction, which is still, I would say now, fortunately has a program which is growing, but it still is, I would say, struggling as a little sister to EBA. There was a lot of heightened interest I would say, over the last year, and it came out quite clearly this week in specific tools, especially mapping, risk mapping. But a new idea, and there are very few examples of this, of land use mapping, looking at ecosystem services and overlaying that with a risk layer. So how are risks affecting your conservation projects? And I think that actually few project managers have actually thought about it, but there are more that are interested in that. And there's some really good examples coming out from the IUCN membership and from IUCN projects. And there was a concrete call for help. You know, we really like to have more information exchange in terms of data sharing and communicating risk. And how can we do that between stakeholders? How do we get the environmental managers together with the DRR managers, between scientists and communities? And again, I see IUCN as a convener for doing that, because we can speak both languages. Economic arguments. We're faced with this over and over again. You're in a room with the finance minister, with the Civil Protection Agency, and the environmental minister. And the environmental minister is trying to convince his counterparts that we need to invest in natural infrastructure. Okay, well, how much is it going to cost, and what's your return on investment? We don't come across as a credible partner unless we have those economic arguments and can talk the same language as these other stakeholders. We need to work with economists. We've pleaded, Radhika's worked a lot in trying to get a TEEB for DRR. We haven't been successful so far, but we're hoping that through some of the members and others that we can actually make that happen. There was also from Johan Scharf from WRI a suggestion to look at the Indian Ocean tsunami 10 years later. in terms of maybe not only economic arguments, but also livelihoods and some of the things that happened 10 years later. So hopefully maybe with Johan we can also look at the economic arguments. Disaster response. There were a couple of sessions on the oil spill, various oil spills, and various responses to that. A lot of them are obviously within environmental focus. Well, let's figure out how we can work more closely together on that. Pete Witt, the head of the ecosystem CM, had a suggestion to come up with a READY framework, and I can't remember what that cute acronym stood for. It was something about the readiness, environmental assistance, disaster. What did that stand for? I don't remember. Pete's not here, but basically it would be to have like a register or a kind of I would say roster of experts who could be called out when there's a disaster to provide environmental expertise. So that's a question, a possible activity that could be explored. Stewardship. The other morning I sat there scratching my head, what stewardship? And I thought, of course, protected areas. We had a whole session on this yesterday. The importance of protected areas is one of IUCN's key, I would say, areas of work. Is extremely important. 14% of the world's surface is protected areas, and they act as a large